to reforming the water sector, and we will be looking in particular this morning at matters pertaining to outages at the end of last year and the beginning of this year in relation to South East Water. Can I thank the witnesses for their attendance this morning? Mr Hinton, welcome back. You've brought some colleagues with you this morning. Can I invite you, just for the benefit of those who are following our proceedings and our own official record, to introduce yourselves to the committee?
Yeah, so I'm David Hinton, CEO of South East Water.
Chris Train, Chair of South East Water.
I'm Caroline Sheridan. I'm an independent non-executive director at South East Water.
Okay. As you know, we've heard from David already. Chris, Caroline, you are non-executive directors. Just for the benefit of the committee, can you give me, maybe start with you, Chris, your understanding of the role and the function of the non-exec director in a company such as this?
The role of the board is to have oversight of the organisation and deliver good governance for the organisation. And in doing that, we challenge the executive team in a constructive manner in order to ensure that the right thought processes and the right assessments are taking place in the organisation in order to be able to develop and support any developments of the organisation. So our role is to independently challenge the actions on behalf of the customers of South East Water, but also the shareholders.
Mm-hmm. So where you see shortcomings, you see it as being part of your role to hold the executive team to account, is that?
Absolutely, that is the role and function of the board. Okay.
Caroline, do you have anything you would want to add to that?
I think I would add the experience that the board bring to a company. And I think that is very helpful to give different perspective, and certainly when we're able to provide challenge to issues and events that may occur. And I think that really does help with the long-term strategic approach for the company as a whole.
Okay, so the board of South East Water has how many non-execs and how many executive directors?
So we have on the board two non-execs, two execs, three non-execs, myself as the independent chair, and two shareholder reps who represent the shareholders. And so that gives that balance of experience that Caroline was just talking about. So
as well as being customer facing, you have a responsibility to ensure that the shareholder interests are properly protected.
Absolutely. We have to take into account that balance of the delivery to customers and the overall long and short term operation of the business.
Okay. David, last time you were here, we spoke about the outage at Tunbridge Wells at the end of November into the early part of December. Let's just say the door had hardly swung shut behind you last time, but there was another outage of some significance in the same area following Storm Goretti. How would you characterise your response to that outage?
It was very, as you say, very soon after. The Tunbridge Wells area hadn't fully recovered, which meant the Tunbridge Wells area was disproportionately affected again, and for which I really apologise for that. Those two events effectively joined up from a Tunbridge Wells point of view. In terms of how I'd categorise it, it was very different to the Pembrey event. The Pembrey event, as we discussed last time, was an issue with water quality which prevented the treatment works from actually producing the required drinking water to meet demand. The event that occurred in Sussex and Kent was, as you say, part of the impact was Goretti. We had effectively a freeze-thaw event prior to Goretti, and that increased the demand on the system. And then Goretti effectively by its nature, power impacts, as well as decreasing raw water quality, meant our supply was reduced. So it effectively made an imbalance between supply and demand across the different.
My question was, how do you characterise your response?
We'd learnt something from the previous one. It was obviously very soon after. We responded with all the resources available to us, utilising a lot of resources we put in recently, the 12 tankers that we've recently purchased, new contracts to help deliver priority service register water deliveries to customers, set up a 1.88 bottle water station, so more than we needed to during the Tunbridge Wells event. So we put all of our effort into ensuring that we had as much as we could on the ground to support those customers.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, you'll recall last time we discussed the input of the local Member of Parliament in Tunbridge Wells, Mike Martin. We've received correspondence from Katie Lamb, whose constituents were affected. Can I just share with you what she said? South East Water was unable to answer even the most basic factual questions, such as, is there actually any bottled water at this bottled water station? Members of her team repeatedly had to drive to the station themselves to establish the facts. She had people contact her who were registered as vulnerable and still unable to access water. Some had newborn babies. There was no number for her to call to help them. South East Water could take days to respond to their supposedly instantaneous email address. They simply had no idea what was going on. Doesn't sound that different from the November-December outage.
We did learn some lessons. Clearly, we've got more to learn. We've put in the short-term resilience plan, which picks up a number of lessons from both events, which were pretty much concurrent. And we've also got a transformation programme we're putting in place for the business to ensure that we pick up all the lessons from these different events, both in terms of engineering side, but also in terms of response. And I'm really disappointed to hear that customers had that experience. One of the things we put in place...
Sorry, are you hearing this for the first time?
No, I'm not hearing it for the first time, but I'm just recognising that we hate it when customers, particularly priority service registered, but any customers, do not receive that alternative water. And that is one of our key focuses. We delivered nearly 35,000 deliveries to vulnerable customers during the January event. Mm-hmm. And I hate it when we miss any. And to hear that it upsets me, and we need to do better.
Mm-hmm. Your response to the first outage was to tell us that you had commissioned your own independent report, which was prepared by Caroline. What do we find that's new in that report that wasn't in the Drinking Water Inspectorate report?
There's a great deal of consistency actually between the two reports, mm-hmm. And I would categorise it.
You effectively, your independent report found the same things as the Drinking Water Inspectorate.
Largely, yeah.
If I told you, David, that the committee felt that the Drinking Water Inspectorate gave a very different picture to the committee than that which had been given by you in their evidence, would that be a fair comment? Are you
regarding the first hearing?
Yes.
We differed on one element, I think. We differed on the element of foreseeability of the event. I didn't really give, as I recall from the notes, any other factual information around the water quality event that differed from the Drinking Water Inspectorate's one. I think the large disagreement area was one on foreseeability.
Mm-hmm. And they said that not only was it foreseeable, but they had foreseen it and they'd warned you about it, didn't they?
I believe that's what they said, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any understanding now of why you didn't act on that warning?
So, the foreseeability question, how I answered it was largely predicated on sort of two pieces of information. One is the stability of the plant over many decades running the same way. And the other one was the belief that the raw water quality had changed significantly at the point that the treatment work started to struggle. Both the independent report and the DWI report, which
the DWI report would be characterised as independent, would it not? Yeah,
it would. Both independent reports have effectively.
We'll come to that later.
Have effectively came up with the same set of conclusions, which I would categorise as there were definitely early warnings at the treatment works that the treatment was not performing as it should. We should have reacted on those earlier warnings quicker, and our problem solving around it when we got into that situation was too slow and unstructured. So the problem solving and the reaction is in my belief, and the timing and the early reaction, both reports agree on as a failing on the Pembury treatment works on that particular week.
Are you still blaming climate change?
No, I'm not blaming climate change. At the time...
You did, and Chris, you did in your correspondence back to me following that session.
It's an element factor, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. The speed and severity of climate change in the South East in particular has outstripped reasonable predictions. Would that still be your assessment today?
I think that still would be the assessment.
You hold to that assessment?
The thing that the independent report couldn't, or the DWI report couldn't verify, was what the state of the water quality in the Pembury Pond was at that point in time. It was our belief at that time, and still is our belief, that that was affected by climate change and the drought that was experienced last summer, and therefore the water levels within that pond.
Because in fact, Ofwat were warning the whole industry as far back as 2008 about the impact of climate change, were they not?
Yeah, and climate change has been a factor in our planning. And we use, traditionally we use government climate change forecasts, particularly when assessing the impact on potential changes to raw water quality, but also in changes on demand and available water. It's fair to say, though, I think the predictions have been outstripped by the actual weather, particularly the extreme weather events and the number of extreme weather events we've experienced over the last few years. I think we've broken the hottest day, the warmest spring, the driest summer. It goes on in a period of about 3 years. So
and this is unique to West Kent, is it?
The factor that makes that a double impact is it's not unique to West Kent, but the southeast of England does experience particularly the hotter summer impact more than the rest of the country. And the unique factor at South East Water is our headroom, our gap between supply and demand is much closer than any other company. Other companies have it in pockets. We have it over Sussex and Kent largely. As you know, we also manage an area that's Surrey and Hampshire, which has larger headroom. And if that was still a company on its own right, that would be the best or second best performing company on infrastructure. So the difference between the two regions is largely the headroom that exists between supply and demand.
What about your root cause analysis of the difficulties? You've heard what Ofwat have to say about that, I understand. What response would you give to Ofwat's analysis of your root cause analysis?
So our root cause analysis is a combination of things, but the fundamental thing for us is that our supply-demand balance is really tight. Now that shouldn't be seen as an excuse. We should monitor and control our assets better in that scenario, and we fully take accountability of that when it doesn't happen.
I mean, Ofwat say that you fundamentally misunderstand the nature and purpose of root cause analysis, and in fact at one point in the course of the investigation you sought clarification on what root cause analysis actually meant.
That inquiry was so that both parties were of a joint understanding of how root cause analysis should be done in this particular case. Root cause analysis has a number of different methodologies. We were trying to establish a methodology that we could both agree on so the findings can be agreed once we followed that route.
Having agreed that, they concluded that you fundamentally misunderstood the nature and purpose of root cause analysis. That you're identifying extreme weather, high demand, leakage as causes. They conclude that these are triggers or immediate causes. Does it concern you that Ofwat reaches that conclusion?
Of course, and we are in the process still with Ofwat, and we're further discussing that. We've put a lot of information into Ofwat about what we believe the root cause analysis. I don't think it's a single thing. I think that's where some of the difficulty between the parties is arising. But we will continue to discuss this with Ofwat as this process progresses.
I mean, the Ofwat work is pretty fundamental. They're saying that extreme weather is a known risk and that you should be prepared for cold weather in January. It's not an unreasonable position to take, but obviously you're not.
We have, so since 2020, when we started to genuinely see the climate change impacts impacting the system, in 2018 there was an industry-wide beach from the east, but prior to that there was not really any single event that caused any impact to South East Water. We started to see them from 2020, and we've worked through the learnings of those. Our ability to deal with an event is far in excess of what it used to be. The resources we have available to us, we have still fallen short. We have still let our customers down when those events do happen, but we have learnt a lot, and we've got more to learn. But we have put some considerable resource into it. I've increased the operational resource available to, in other words, the operations teams by over 20% in the last 3 years. And that's allowed us to be able to respond. We still have got more to do.
You've let your customers down. What are you going to do to make up to that?
We are going to. So we have been, as a business, focused on absolutely getting the infrastructure procured through the regulatory process to allow us to provide future resilience to our customers in the presence of climate change, in the presence of housing growth, and we now have that. That process is now finished. So we are knuckling down to deliver that infrastructure. That's what effectively will deliver the resilience and secure the supplies for the customers.
Okay, the question was about what you're doing to compensate your customers.
When the events occur, we compensate them using the GSS payment system for both business and household customers.
And the actual losses incurred by businesses?
We've opened a fund. We've opened it last week.
How big is that fund?
We've initially put aside £600,000 for that fund.
Mm-hmm. If I told you that Mike Martin MP has written to the committee again, telling us that he's conducted his own survey, I don't think he's pretending that this is scientific, but he's had 100 businesses respond with a loss totalling something in the region of 1.2 million. 600,000 isn't going to touch the sides, is it?
Well, we'll run the process. Businesses can apply. It closes on the end of May, and then we'll assess those cases as they come in, and then we will have a basis on which to make that judgment. So
do you anticipate that you would compensate anybody who can demonstrate a loss?
We will run the process and we'll see how that process...
No, but the purpose of the process, let's look at the outcome. Is the purpose of the outcome to compensate any business that sustained a loss? We will look at sustaining a loss, insurability and a number of other factors when we pay the claim. We put aside £600,000 to do that, and we'll do it on a case-by-case basis. From that, I understand that if you take the view that somebody should have insured against the risk of your company's poor performance, then you wouldn't expect to pay them compensation? I'm not fully up to speed with the rules of the scheme, but what I would say is... But it's not about the rules of the scheme, Mr Hinton, it's about what you intend to do as a company. We will not make a judgment on whether they should have insured. We will just take into account whether they have been insured. Right. The last time you were here, you gave yourself 8 out of 10 for your response to the outage at the end of November, January. How would you mark yourself out of 10 for the subsequent outage? So if I can slightly rewind, so I gave 8 out of 10 for the response, and in my mind when I gave that answer, I was thinking about what the teams had done to procure the extra resource, arrange the extra contracts, work on the bottled water stations, deliver in all sorts of weather, and the effort that the teams have put in behind. That was what was in my mind when I gave it 8 out of 10. All of which has to do with South East Water, very little to do with customer outcome. If I it has, so. And that is absolutely right. But a number of factors were in my mind when you asked me to score, and for that reason, it's really, really hard to score. And so I don't intend to score it again, if that's okay, Chair. It's so complicated. There's, as you pointed out, there's staff, there's customers, there's a number of different impacts that needs to be considered. Give me a word then if it's not an 8 out of 10. Sorry? Give me a word. Good, bad, indifferent? Disappointing. Disappointing. Disappointing suggests it's against a framework of expectation. My expectation is that we deliver to all priority service customers.
and that the bottled water stations are completely resourced the whole time, and customers can get access to alternative water at all times. So whenever we do not meet that particular yardstick, then I'm disappointed.
Yes, you're the non-exec chairman. What mark would you give the company for its response to the 2 outages?
I don't think it's appropriate. This is complex. We failed on the basic objective of delivering water to customers. And therefore that is a failure, and we recognise that failure.
You've been told by somebody preparing you not to answer this question.
No, this is what I feel is the right answer to the question. That we failed our customers. We worked very hard to rectify that situation, and since the events and the independent reviews, we have undertaken a lot of actions to improve the resilience of the operations.
The purpose of asking you to give a mark is so that your customers have an understanding of how you see your performance on a scale. That's why we ask for a figure like this.
Yeah.
You've told us already that it's part of your responsibility as a non-exec director to look to customer interests. Do you not think your customers deserve that degree of accountability from you?
And that degree of accountability is that we accept that we failed in our primary duty, and we could have done better with all of the factors, and that's one of the
if I'm a customer in Tunbridge Wells, what does that tell me? I think we know that you've failed. It's surely important to them that you understand and you're prepared to explain the extent of the failure, and apparently you're not.
Failure is failure, and we have failed, and what's important is that we as an organisation learn from that in order that we don't fail at any point in the future. It is not right that it is absolutely untenable for customers to be without water, and whatever we do on alternative water, however good we are at alternative water, that does not substitute from a customer's perspective not being able to...
Well, as the non-exec director, then why do you reward failure within the company?
Sorry?
As the non-executive director, why do you reward failure within the company?
We don't reward failure.
Remind me of Mr. Hinton's salary increase and bonus.
So David's salary...
I mean, a £400,000 bonus, is that correct?
No, that's incorrect.
No. Sorry, well, tell me what the figures are then.
David's salary is subject to the remuneration committee of the board.
Yeah, we know that. Other non-exec directors.
Yeah.
What's the salary?
And the salary is 400,000.
Right. And the performance payment on top of that?
And the performance payment for this year, we have not finalised, but Dave has indicated that he is not prepared to take a bonus this year.
You were prepared to give him one?
No, David...
I mean, this isn't an event that's just happened. There's been a history of systemic failing within this company since 2018 onwards, has there not?
There have been a number of failures in the organisation.
And in that time, salaries have gone up and bonuses have increased.
As I say, the REMCO, Remuneration Committee, benchmarks the salaries of the executives in order that we make sure that we are getting the best balance of quality of executive for the organisation.
Any that fails, its customers and presumably also its shareholders as a consequence.
we are disappointed. Dave has surrendered his bonus, even if we were going to give. As a remuneration committee, that made the conversation probably a lot easier than it might have been otherwise. But Dave recognises that, the board recognises that within the remuneration committee also.
What effective difference do you make as non-executive directors here? Either of you?
So we make a big difference, I think, and the organisation...
How bad would it be without you then?
Pardon?
How bad would it be without you if you're making a big difference?
This is governance is an important part of running an organisation, and the experience and quality and challenge that the board and the non-executive directors bring to the executive team is very valuable in running a good company. We have failed in a number of areas in terms of there are opportunities for us to learn and develop. One of the points made within the independent report is around the management of risk and the balance of risk. We have a pretty typical risk management system, that framework that we use of parent risks, child risks within the organisation. What I think we could improve on is that level of balance of the operational risk and the operational decision making within.
Well, I mean, your government has been criticised by the Secretary of State. Sorry, your company's been criticised by the Secretary of State, the Prime Minister, a whole range of different public and private bodies. Your own shareholders have expressed concerns, but you're still content that you do a good job and you should remain there.
I think that's a slight misrepresentation. We are concerned. It is not a good position to.
NatWest Pension Fund said that in their 25% owners that they were extremely concerned by the impact on customers and said they would use their influence to direct South East Water's board to ensure these issues are fully resolved. Did they direct you in that way?
They did, and that is that's an absolutely appropriate statement. As a shareholder, you are concerned around the performance of the organisation, and it is really important that we learn the lessons. As Dave said, there was no one individual cause of the event, but there are a number of failures and weaknesses in the process that we need to make sure are rectified across the piece. As a board, we have put a lot of focus on both the short-term measures and the long-term measures that will improve the resilience, particularly around Tunbridge Wells.
I've taken long enough on this. I don't think we're going to make any further progress. But Jenny, you've got a point to come in on.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question. Chris, you said earlier you failed customers, you failed in your primary duty, we failed a number of areas, and there are opportunities for us to learn and develop. As the Chair just said, how bad would things have to get for a change in leadership at the very top?
So it is really important for the board to have good leadership in the organisation, and we have looked, as you would expect us to do, at what the appropriate leadership of the organisation is going forward. The board has given its commitment and its backing to Dave and the executive team going forward as the right solution for delivering what is best for South East Water customers. Alongside that, we recognise that there are a number of forward-looking challenges, and we're bolstering the executive team with a number of external hires, which will cover a broader spectrum of leadership across the organisation.
When we were last here, we were examining an issue in November, and we called you back, we're examining issue in January. If we call you back for a third issue in the spring, will this leadership team still be here, and will we be scrutinising the same leadership team, or will it be a new face?
That's not an appropriate question to answer because it depends upon the circumstances. The board is backing Dave as chief executive and the executive team.
Sorry, Chair, I feel like we're wading through treacle here. We're not really getting... You haven't answered my colleague's original question, which is what would it take for a change in leadership? You've had an outage that affected tens of thousands of people, another outage that affected tens of thousands of people, a proposed fine because 286,000 customers have been failed according to Ofwat. The Chair has pointed out the Prime Minister feels that what's happened is unacceptable. What more has to happen for Mr Hinton's position to be untenable?
And the reason for not asking the question, I don't think it's appropriate to hypothesise. What is important is learning what has caused the events and making the appropriate changes within the organisation to deliver against those. The board are backing the executive team to deliver against that. And that's not without its challenges, without a doubt, but we are backing the executive team.
Part of remedying what's happened is people having confidence.
Yeah.
And your customers clearly don't have confidence, as has been expressed by the leader of Kent County Council, 7 local members of Parliament. This committee has made its concerns very, very clear. Why isn't the confidence of your customers not an important part of you turning this around?
Confidence is a hugely important part, and we do need to rebuild confidence within our customer base, that we are doing the right things and that we are delivering against the requirements of our customers. And we believe that is best served by Dave and the team delivering.
Yeah.
As you said, this is a failure of your basic objectives, and it's failure after failure, excuse after excuse. The board is not doing its job. It's not delivering on governance, it's not delivering on accountability, and as my colleague Tim just said, you've lost the faith of your customers, and the only way to rebuild that faith is to take action to change leadership. Why did you not see that is a very basic part of this? Any other company that has failed on its basic objectives, that has, mistake after mistake from 2018 onwards, a failure to react and implement recommendations one time after another, and yet here we are. I'm just frankly flabbergasted that nobody is accountable for the mess that the company's in.
We are accountable for where we are. We, as a board, we have to step back and ask the questions that you're asking. We have to look at the broad context of the organisation. We have to look at the context of the industry and the sector, and we have to do what we think is best in the best interests of South East Water customers.
You might be asking the right questions, but I think you're coming up with the wrong answers.
Yeah. Okay. I can see we're not going to shift this, so I think we'll move on. Julia, you have some questions around the foreseeability of the issues at Pembury.
Thank you, Chair. So you and the DWI disagree on how far in advance the issues at Pembury could have been foreseen. You claim that between the 1st and the 15th of November, the treatment works were operating normally. But the DWI states that there have been clear signals from as early as the 9th of November. Do you think that the DWI is wrong?
No. I've gone over the information both from the independent investigation and DWI's independent investigation, and there are signals in the early parts of November that we should have reacted to. We should have done more in the early part of the early part of the period. We should have then used different problem-solving skills, used more advanced problem-solving skills, and remedied the situation quicker, and that would not have impacted customers. So both reports conclude around that same issue. It was the reaction to what was appearing to be a treatment works that was going out of control, that we were too slow on that. And I agree, that is what happened at Pembury.
Okay. So the DWI identified problems with coagulant dosing assets at Pembury over 10 years ago. It says it doesn't understand why you've not installed more modern systems. Could you tell us as a committee why?
So the system, without getting too technical, but the system at Pembury has, it changes the coagulant with the flow rate. There are more advanced systems available. Pembury is due to be upgraded in 2028. When you change something like a coagulant system, quite often you need to change the control philosophy of the site, and that was very much planned as part of that upgrade. What we should have recognised in the interim, while we were waiting for that upgrade, is that we should have been monitoring it more often and harder and more appropriately in the space between where we were and the upgrade itself. It's absolutely intended to upgrade Pembury when we upgrade the plant as a whole up to a more modern coagulation system.
And have you got a time frame of when you're...
We're starting it in 2028. It will take a number of years to do the whole plant because it is the sole treatment process for Tunbridge Wells, so it can't be taken offline. We need to do it while it's live. So it'll be a long project, but coagulation will be very early in that process.
And so really my question is, it's 10 years ago it was identified needed updating.
And like I say, it's not an outlier in being just a flow-controlled coagulation, but there are more modern equivalents available. And no, like I say, without putting that in, we should have monitored it more as an alternative, and we didn't do that.
So my final question to you is, the argument about raw water quality changes was central to your assertion in January that this incident was not foreseeable and it was not preventable. Did you mislead the committee?
That is what I thought at the time. The evidence I had at the time was that the things that's... When we have a treatment work failure or anything, actually, we look to see what has changed because the plant was running in a certain way and something changed. The raw water quality did change, but it didn't become exceptional. I accept that now. At the time, I thought it was exceptional. I accept that now that it wasn't exceptional, and there was a number of other causes as highlighted by the DWI and the independent report that contributed to that. So I gave the full evidence as I understood it to be at the time. More evidence has come to light, and so I absolutely agree that that position, given that information, was foreseeable.
And so in the future, will you be taking different actions?
Absolutely. We've already taken a number of actions at Pembury, a number of actions across the whole treatment works in terms of the process. We've installed the 2 filters that we discussed at the previous hearing. We've changed some of the washing philosophies on the filters. We've added more monitors into the system, and we've overall increased the jar testing. We've done a complete overhaul of the risks we face at Pembury to take us to the point where we can do the full refurb of the plant.
These are things that the Drinking Water Inspector has been telling you for some time to do, are they not? Yeah.
We have the DWI audited us earlier in the year, and we agreed a set of commitments with the DWI at that time, and we are on course to deliver those by the dates that we collectively agreed with each other during that process.
The difficulty I have with this, David, is that last time you told us you couldn't talk to your customers at the time because you were leading from the front operationally. Leading from the front operationally, you still didn't know at the beginning of January that these failings were there.
So, as I said before, what I meant by that was there was an event that I was running. I was running an event that was impacting the Tunbridge Wells area pre-Christmas. And it was a complicated, as you'll recall, we talked about this for some time, it was a complicated water quality event, and I felt I could add some expertise to that, so I did go to site.
This is fundamental stuff, and it's fundamental stuff that you've been warned about by regulators. So you would surely have been looking for it, were you not? When still you're telling us you didn't see it.
We didn't see this particular issue, and we should have seen it. And like I said, the DWI and South East Water have agreed a set of undertakings that we're on course to deliver. We're accelerating those, as you might imagine, and we've done a lot more than was in that, effectively, in that set of undertakings with DWI already, including the 2 filters.
Okay, and Chris, you've discussed this internally, have you? Are you satisfied with this?
We have.
As a non-exec?
I mean, more than discussing it internally, we've been down to the Pembury Works. We've had a look at the facility, and we had a look at the challenges that there are and the work that has been done in order to improve the resilience of the site. And clearly one of the big things that will help to improve resilience of supplies to Tunbridge Wells is the investment in Buell, which I'm very pleased to say that the Competition and Market Authority in their assessment have essentially funded an extra 100 million in resilience.
You see, you've been down. How often do you go down to Pembury?
So Pembury Works, I have been down to on one occasion.
This is your single treatment work, and you hadn't visited it before this.
This is one of 88 treatment works that South East Water run.
Tunbridge Wells, though, it's a single point, is it not?
It's not the only single point
Right.
on the system, and this is one of the challenges that South East Water faces, is that, and it's why we're very supportive of the government's white paper on setting resilience standards for the water sector, because without that, your ability to invest in resilience is somewhat limited.
Right. But given all the previous warnings and the history of this plant, you've only visited it once. You've been a non-exec director since 22?
22.
22, and chairman since then as well? Okay. Right, we're going to move on now to questions around monitoring, maintenance and culture. Henry, you're going to lead our questioning.
Thank you, Chair. If I just sort of start with the maintenance and monitoring, I think, Mr. Hinton, you talked about, you gave an answer to my colleague just now about the need for more advanced problem solving. But I think what's striking when you look at the DWI report is about the basics, routine maintenance. So they set out that that was just not being undertaken. I think 7 of 13 scheduled site visits relating to the DAF stage, which is the dissolved air flotation and filtration stage, were not started or completed between the 9th of November and the 25th of November. And filters not being washed adequately in the months before the incident. So you're not doing the basics, are you?
I think that was one of the root causes identified by both the two different investigations.
Well you say hold on a second, because you say that, but yes. in the report that you talk about gaps in operation. I mean, this is not just a gap. You're not doing over half of what you're meant to be doing.
The maintenance that you're talking about is a routine daily maintenance that the individual technicians on site perform. That will never be totally 100% because they react to what's happening on the plant as well, and they will judge on that risk assessment. Now, 7 out of 13 is not good enough. What this has shown to us as an executive team is that the teams are too reactive, and they're not spending enough time on the routine tasks. That the area, particularly in the Kent and Sussex area, and particularly in the Kent area, is an area that needs to have all of the treatment works running at all times. It is a very tight supply-demand balance, and that has generated a reactive culture that we really, really need to resolve. This is not the choice of the individuals, it's the pressure that we put on it. So that's one of the reasons we've increased the operational staff by 100 people. That's one of the reasons we put in a planned maintenance team that's dedicated to doing the planned maintenance so the operators can operate. These aren't things I've put in since November, these have been in for a while. It's a key part of the transformation programme that we've launched going forward, is to refocus our teams which have been under pressure, ensuring that all plants were running at all time to meet the supply-demand balance, which is really tight in the area. And like I said before, the investment is the long-term solution to that, but in the interim we need to get better at this, and 7 out of 13 is not good enough. And that's why those changes are already in. We really need to get them deeply embedded to ensure that what we're doing on the plant ensures that the plant we have got is running at all times. We've got the second best outage record in the industry. In other words, our works run more than anyone else in terms of percentage of the time they need to run. And but that focus has meant, in my view, that we need to restore some of the resource available to do some of the more basic tasks on a daily basis. And that's, like I say, why we've made those changes already. We made those changes 18 months ago. And they are, we're recruiting into those roles.
I suppose part of understanding what maintenance needs to be done is that you have to monitor what's happening in the first place. And the DWI also set out that there wasn't enough monitoring going on at the Pembury works, particularly around optimising that coagulation process. So there's no continuous temperature monitoring, and the critical treatment parameters not being monitored. So that's raw water conductivity, coagulant flow, aluminium concentrations. Effectively, I think it was said to the committee after the evidence you gave in January by Marcus Rink that you were flying blind in the lead up to the event. Do you accept that you were flying blind?
I accept that we weren't recording absolutely what we should have been recording. We were reliant on the fact that the works had run stable for so long, that with the parameters we were measuring, that we didn't think about the risk enough. Risk has been a big learning from both the independent review and the DWI review. We don't, in my view, and what one of the big parts of the transformation is to have risk embedded right down to a site level. So we have complete visibility throughout the business. The water industry historically manages risk at a site level. It allows the operators to manage the risk. And that visibility, we want more of. So we are deeply embedding risk right across the organisation, so we can see when these issues begin, when we can start, when issues around maintenance start to arise, when issues around water quality performance start to arise. We need that visibility. So risk has become a really strong learning for us from both the independent reviews.
Yeah, I mean, well, you touched on risk. So I think in your report, during site interviews, there was no structured mechanism for how to capture or escalate risks from the operators. So that presumably was incredibly concerning to you.
And just to be clear, it's not my report, it's the board commissioned this report. But so that was exactly what I'm talking to. Historically, the water industry, and certainly in my experience, it might not be more widely undertaken, but the risk is managed at a local level, and they manage it, as you might imagine, with this is the job list for the day, and I'm going to undertake this. That isn't good enough anymore. That effectively needs to be escalated so there's complete visibility of risk right the way through the organisation, and that's what would have prevented this event. It allows us to operate in an environment which is really water stressed and everything needs to be running to maintain supply, and that is a key element of the transformation that we have launched as a result of these two events and from the learnings of the previous years in terms of how tight our system is operating.
So you talk about risk, and the regulators there to manage that risk, hold you to account. You didn't carry out any jar testing in October. That was something that the DWI found. Despite that there being a requirement under regulatory notice to do so, and they found that had the optimisation process been followed, the original coagulant should have worked. So there seems to be a complete lack of acceptance that there is, risks need to be managed, they need to work, but you're not even complying under your regulatory notices in respect of lead up to this event.
We did miss a jar test, I agree, and that's unacceptable. In terms of being able to control the process, post the water quality challenges, we didn't. I think I mentioned this earlier. It's a problem-solving process. So once presented with a treatment works that's not behaving, there's a set of things to try and do. I don't think we did that in a structured enough way to get to the point of resolution. We ended up changing the coagulant as the solution, but the DWI are right.
You didn't do a jar testing till the 28th of November.
Yeah, we missed a jar test. And that is unacceptable. and it may well have given us an even earlier warning than the one we had in November. But as the DWI said, the 9th of November was the earliest indication that the treatment works was not performing as it should. So, but I fully take it that we should have reacted earlier to that. And like I say, the problem solving, we were doing a lot. You can see from the Drinking Water Inspectorate's report that we were not asleep at the wheel in terms of the response on the site. It was ineffective in terms of resolving the issue.
Well, let's talk about being asleep at the wheel, shall we? Because in the control room, right, that the DWI set out what you were doing there. It's only manned Monday to Friday during the day, and there's no one there otherwise to monitor issues and nothing to see the emerging problems. Do you not think that's being asleep at the wheel?
No, I'm afraid that's not correct. So we have a 24/7 man control room that's got full visibility of all the treatment works, all our 88 treatment works, and the different steps that exist, and they're all alarmed. So we've got full, in fact, I could fire it up on my laptop and look at all 88 treatment works now. So we've got full visibility of all those treatment works. And like I say, they're all alarmed. They got warning alarms, high alarms, low alarms. There's alarms set on all those different treatment works.
Well, the DWI recommended better response systems in respect of your control rooms in 2018, 2022, 23, but even in April 24, you still haven't taken up any of those recommendations.
I'm not familiar with recommendations relating to the control room. It might be related to
in terms of your response systems.
So the control room had visibility. The control room operates largely to assist when staff are not on site. So the staff on site have local alarms. They see a local, effectively mimic of the treatment works, and they operate that. The control room operates out of hours, if you like, to have the same view. And we were. I think that the alarms showed, and the trends, more importantly than the alarms showed, there was an issue. And again, I go back to we didn't respond to it quick enough. That was. I don't think it was an issue so much of visibility, but of reaction to the visibility. We've all looked at the data since, including both independent reports and not generating any new data, can see where there was a response required that was different to the one we gave.
It's quite concerning because I think in correspondence, Mr. Train, you just set out that in terms of staffing, this is sort of in line with industry standards in correspondence.
And it isn't.
Nothing to see here, Gov. It's all fine.
No, so the response that I put in writing was an attempt to demonstrate why we had said what we had said, which was the question that the chair asked us within his letter. Different companies, different scale of works, different vulnerabilities will operate sites in different ways. But this is a pretty normal industry standard manning site control room operations. Is there an opportunity to improve that? Yes, there is. And that is part of our transformation plan, so that we get a more proactive rather than reactive view of the situations on site, so that we can proactively manage better. We have essentially become a very responsive organisation rather than a proactive organisation. And when we talk about control systems, I think this is one of those areas where we really need to invest as an organisation.
You told the chair that you'd been in post since 2022, and obviously your role is to hold the executive to account. Are you concerned that safety wasn't one of the company's values, or isn't one of the company's values?
No, safety is very much in the company's DNA.
But it's not one of your. It's flagged in your own report that so you've got a reactive, as you said, reactive and distinctive approach to safety. It's not part of your.
Again, so our response in this situation was very reactive, and that's one of the learnings in terms of what data were we looking at to understand the risks that were being taken on the site. We have said we didn't react to the signals of the changes quick enough.
In terms of the culture of the organisation that you oversee and the scrutiny and accountability, you're not concerned that you've been in post for over 2 years and you never thought that maybe safety should be part of the organisational embedded?
It is part.
Well, it's not though. It's not in your report.
And that's talking of one dimension of safety. In terms of the processes, there are multi-factors in terms of the organisation. But organisationally, we want to do the right thing for customers, and we've talked about our failures in doing that in this instance.
I think the reason why I'm pushing this point is because the report talks about groupthink. And obviously, as the chairs and non-executive directors, it's your responsibility to guard against that. And it's concerning that you don't seem to be doing your job properly.
And in looking at the outcome of the investigation report, we are bolstering the executive team to, and the people that we have brought in and will be bringing in are from outside the organisation, and that will create more challenge in the executive team around the decisions and the actions and the directions that are taking. So we have recognised that.
Do you understand why it's so important though? Because if you read the DWI report, the company places too much focus on attention on the bad batch theory for the coagulant, which means that theory effectively fits the narrative being put forward that's outside the company's control, even though DWI states there's no evidence for that being the case. So if there's a lack of critical thinking going on in respect of you and your role of your non-executive team, that seeps through into the company's culture, and then that has a real direct impact on its customers and on how it operates in the day-to-day.
At the point in time that the incident was occurring, the first thing you do as a response is to look at what's different. What was different was a change in coagulation batch. So there was a changeover. So there was a natural response to look at cause and effect at that point in time. That turned out to be false, and and therefore delayed the organisational and operational response in this instance, in this measure.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm struck by the fact that you keep conceding mistakes, but you've never yet explained why these things were allowed to happen, and why these things were allowed to happen over a course of years. Caroline, how long have you been a non-exec director for?
I've been a non-executive for just over a year.
Just over a year. So some of this was happening on your watch.
Yes, that's right.
But you were still allowed to mark your own homework.
So the reason for instigating the independent review was from discussions with the board members around how the Pembury incident and the impact on customers of Tunbridge Wells was not something that we were talking about as a board, to be brutally honest. It wasn't on our risk radar. What we were talking about...
You don't think if you'd been doing the job of a non-exec it should have been?
I think we were very heavily focused on some of the known issues across South East Water, which have been the lack of resilience, lack of headroom, the impact on customers because of the supply-demand issue. And it is true to say that we spent a lot of time focusing on that.
We've heard from David here about risk, as if suddenly you've just discovered risk as an issue for the first time.
No, and I think we have been talking across. As I've been appointed, I've got a lot of experience in asset management and engineering, plus water sector and safety critical environments, and have been meeting with the team to discuss asset management and to discuss how we look after and maintain our assets. I think one of the key findings from this report is around the visibility of some of the risks. And that is something that we absolutely need to improve, such that we can see the risks on single points of failure, like Pembury, and can review that we are taking the right action, as has been recommended in this report and the DWI report, and have direct visibility that that is happening, so that we can prevent incidents like Pembury happening again.
You sit there today and tell us that it won't happen again.
Unfortunately, I can't sit here today and say it won't happen again.
No.
We have, specifically for Pembury, taken the action and overseen that the action has been taken. Immediate responses to ensure that we have got greater visibility of the system, of the water quality process that goes on in Pembury. And I think the DWI are absolutely right to talk about early monitoring and visibility of
In the
that.
same way that they were right to talk about all the various things that they'd been talking about for years, and frankly, South East Water had just ignored.
I think it's very true to say that having the two independent reports has really given us a different perspective and to help really inform the conversations that we are having.
Well, let's just look at the independence of your report. You were commissioned by the board.
Yeah.
You later brought in 3 other assessors, if I can put it like that. How far into your report process were these people brought in?
When did we appoint them?
Yeah.
So it was before Christmas that I've had the first conversation with the lead investigator. He is known to me. I've not worked with him.
When was he appointed?
When was he appointed? He started work between Christmas and New Year, I think, in terms of payments. That would have been early January.
So what has your report found that the DWI had not already found when we heard from them in January?
I think the findings that the DWI presented at the first committee is in line with what we have found. The reason we did this was to provide a...
You didn't accept the findings of the DWI report?
I think
Or
what
if
we
you
wanted...
accepted them, what was the point of your report?
The point of our report was to look internally at broader factors as what was going on and how had we not seen this coming when we really should have done. And we brought in a range of independent people who had not been associated with South East Water previously to provide that insight. And I think it's been really helpful that they have looked at this. They've had the opportunity to talk to a number of employees of South East Water to really help inform the view of what we must do next. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the findings that we have in the independent review has already, things are in motion already.
Well,
However,
why did they go wrong in the first place? That's the question that we've not heard answered by David.
why did it go wrong?
Yeah. Why did the failings that led to the incident in November, December, and then the later one in January, why did they happen?
So there's no single root cause. I would say that it is not due to water quality variances of extremities. It's fragility across the system. So Pembury operates a chemical process fundamentally, and layers of protection have been gradually eroding, and we didn't have sight of the system as a whole.
Is that not what you're there to do as a non-exec director?
That is what we're
So
there.
why didn't you?
Because at the time, a lot of the focus was on the long-term resolution, which is desperately needed, the investment that we need to make in Pembury. I think there has been a breakdown in some of the layers of risk reporting and the approach, which is quite normal within the water sector, to report risk at a site-by-site level. We need to be much better at analysing this. We need to be looking at our single points of failure. We are in a very good position to have the investment now to be able to increase headroom, increase resilience. But fundamentally, until we get there, we really do need to be making sure that we've got the control of the sites as a system and understand the controls that need to be in place to ensure that water can be supplied to our customers.
What sort of company did you think you were joining when you joined the board? Did you realise you were coming into this sort of setup?
I knew I was joining a water-stressed company, and part of my reason for...
The problems go far beyond water stress.
Sorry.
The problems of the company go far beyond water stress. They are surely much more deep-seated than that.
I think prior to me joining the company, that is not something that...
Did you read the DWIs and the what reports going back to 2018 before you joined the board?
Not going back to 2018, but I did read the DWI reports. I think it's an excellent source of understanding how a company is performing. but I'm very passionate about the water sector and wanted to bring my experience to the board when they have got significant demands in increasing the amount of investment and clearly a need to look at the asset management and the resilience of the network.
Okay. Charlotte, you're going to do some questioning in relation to changes on incident preparations.
Yes, I mean, if we sort of go back to 2018 and the sort of Beast from the East incident, and then 4 years on from that, Mr. Hinton, when the 2022 outage occurred affecting 85,000 customers, your own analysis, the company's own analysis at the time, found that 61 actions identified for the 2018 event had not been implemented. And here we are at the end of 2025 with another 60,000 customers impacted. What faith can we have now that you are learning lessons and we're not going to get into this Groundhog Day situation as my colleague in the area, Nusgani, described it, where 1 year after another there is just problem after problem. The company is not learning its lessons.
I'm going to have to come back to you on that. I don't recognise 61 incomplete actions on Beast from the East.
It was in 2022.
Okay. 2022, there's a number of actions in there, which again, I don't recognise 61 being incomplete. We have the list of actions we put in place following all these events and the scale of our response, which is one of the real challenges, the scale of the response across a wide geographical area. Then, like I said, we've employed 20 tanker drivers just to do alternative water. We can set up to 10 or 12 bottled water stations. In Beast from the East, we could only do 2. We've got contracts to deliver to livestock with third parties so that we can peak lot. We've got third parties to deliver to vulnerable customers. We've got third parties to assist with bottled water stations. You understand that is necessary to have the third party support because you suddenly need a demanding resource, potentially instantaneously. And all those are in place, as are some learnings already from the recent event. So the communication about bottled water stock levels has been mentioned today already. We've developed, for want of a better expression, an app which allows us to communicate with each other and soon to be with customers about live stock levels. So there's a list of learnings that we've done from each one. We hadn't had, prior to 2018, any events that were greater than the burst main and 18-hour interruption for a much smaller number of customers. So we've had to resource and increase the resource exponentially. Like I said before, we have not got all the way there. There's more we need to do on livestock. There's more resource we need to do on priority services register. Missing any customer on the priority services register, I'll get deeply upset about. And we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. That's further resource in a technology largely and in a list of priority services. So we've moved on an enormous amount, but we are not fully there yet.
You mentioned livestock. It's interesting. My colleague Helen Waitley said to me ahead of the meeting that you were dismissive, frankly, of farmers when they raised concerns towards the end of last year because they couldn't access water. Now, I appreciate there is a hierarchy of priorities in terms of vulnerable customers, etc. But would you accept that you were dismissive of farmers?
Absolutely not. I mean, I found it a really tricky issue. We were trying to prioritise, as you rightly say, between the different areas, and it was an uncomfortable conversation. I would not like anyone to be concerned about their livestock, and it doesn't exist. This issue doesn't exist across our patches. There's both farming livestock, and there's also, if you like, owned livestock, like in a domestic property, so horses. So we have now set up again with a dedicated contract to be able to deliver standing water to livestock. Our next step, which we promised, is to create a livestock register, which will be the first in the UK, so we understand where the livestock are prior to the event happening, rather than being reactive to the livestock. It's something again. It's something that we know is live. If I came across dismissive, I apologise. That was not my intention.
And just in terms of escalating matters more quickly, it was something we discussed at the previous hearing here, and there was some criticism that perhaps things had not escalated. Do you have faith in a multi-agency approach to the local area, the local resilience forum, etc., to be able to implement action plans more quickly?
Yeah, and we are working really hard with the local resilience forums. We've got some workshops we're doing with local resilience forums and stakeholders to examine the response to alternate water in what everyone's calling peacetime, so that we can look at the locations of the bottled water that we all agree for different times of the year And we're working really closely with the local resilience forums to run joint exercises to test both of our responses. And there's a real keenness from the local resilience forums to assist in some areas. So there's a real keenness to assist in priority service register deliveries, for example. And we need to coordinate that because, again, I go back to the biggest worry is that we don't get a delivery. So when we need coordinated resources and coordinated activity, but we are working very hard with the local resilience forums to do that, and they're very receptive to that, and they've really supported us during both events. They were extremely supportive.
Well, you would accept that some of the sites chosen to distribute water last time was pretty farcical in terms of their accessibility, the other services that they were being used for at the time. For example, it was what not the shuttle bus to Heathrow location, etc. Train rail replacement service. All of that, I hope, is now being taken into account. Can you give us the confidence that in a future event, those sites are already identified and are appropriate?
We had sites identified, and what we need to do, and what this event and the Christmas event highlighted to us, and it seems obvious when you say it now, is different sites for different times of year and understanding what is going on locally. So, for example, we knew there was a Christmas event which needed to use the car park that we intended to use. We didn't know that. If we'd have spoke to the local authority, they would have informed us that car park wasn't available. Again, with the rail strike, we were not aware that effectively that the buses would be using the car park, etc. So that goes back to working really closely with local resilience forums to understand the local response is the response that we need to give, the other thing we're working hard with local authorities on is local, if you like, bespoke bottled water stations that effectively drop off in parish car parks, Cub Scout huts, those kind of things. That was the population of small villages very much wanted to run that themselves. And again, it's a control issue, making sure everyone gets it, but it then eliminates the need for some of the really, really rural communities to travel a long way to, say, the centre of Tunbridge Wells, the centre of East Grinstead. So again, that is on our action list. We did it a couple of occasions in this particular period, but that's definitely on our action list for the future.
Just one final question on Chair. Mr. Trainer, you received a letter from 6 local MPs in January, Helen Whately, Mims Davis, Rosie Duffield, Helen Grant, Katie Lamb and Tom Tugendhat, calling for a change of leadership. Now, MPs are not shy of writing letters, but it's unusual for them to write a letter of, I think, calling for such a severe change at a local private company. Ms. Sheridan, what was your reflection on that letter?
Well, I think, as we've already discussed around the board back Dave and the reasons for that. And, I acknowledge, and I think as a board we really do hear the voice of the MP. They've got an important job to do and are representing their constituents. As Chris has already outlined, we have to look at the entire picture and the risks that we are trying to manage. And it is fair to say, whilst the reading of both the independent reports, both our internal one plus the DWIs, is difficult reading, a lot of the findings have already had action undertaken by Dave and the executive team that simply just aren't going fast enough. And therefore we need to ensure that we put this transformation plan around South East Water so that it can go faster for customers. We have made changes to the leadership team and new people have been coming in. We, as a board and the independent non-executives, have been working very closely with the executives to help articulate our concerns and the focus that is necessary. So in response, I think we acknowledge and understand their concern, but we are here to do the right thing for our customers ultimately, for now and for the long term.
Was the unanimous support for the current leadership amongst the board?
As a board, yes.
So the culture of groupthink that you've identified, you think you will fix by adding people to the leadership team?
I think we will fix it, one, by acknowledging that there is a risk with the culture of South East Water, which comes from the history of the company. It's a very family feel to the company. Lots of people have worked there for a long time. Lots of people are residents themselves, a local community, and it has really strong benefits. However, it also has red flags, and what we have done is brought in strength to the executive team, people from broader experience who have been brought in deliberately to be able to have a voice and a challenge. And I see the dynamic on the board as well, which we bring in a voice and a different perspective.
This
to
culture
challenge.
hasn't just happened, it's grown up over years, hasn't it?
And changing a culture will not happen immediately, but we need to take the steps to, one, identify the risks.
What are the metrics that you will identify as important in identifying that you've been successful in changing the culture then?
So I think there's a number of things that we need to consider as a board, and how do we measure?
What are the metrics? How will we know what success looks like?
Well, I think some of the metrics, one, the outcomes to customers will definitely change, because there's a common thread between the culture of an organisation, the ability for people to speak up and have a systematic approach to risk management, for example. We will see that ultimately in customer outcomes. To measure on the journey to get there, we need to be
Have you got a metric for customer satisfaction?
It's certainly something that we should be considering, and
You should be considering.
There is a measure on customer satisfaction.
Yeah,
is it differentiated enough?
What measure of improvement do you intend to see in that metric? Can you give us figures today?
So the bit that I think is really important.
Sorry, I'm running this long, so if we can just keep tight to the answers to the questions that we asked, please.
The point I'm trying to make is that what is really important is what local customers are feeling, and that can get hidden
and
in a
that,
metric.
And you've got a figure at the moment, you've got your baseline. What then do you want to get that figure to? Have you got that figure?
Not at the top of my
You
head.
don't. Okay. Sarah, you wanted to ask some questions.
Thank you, Chair. David, last time you were in front of the committee, you told us that your natural position was to go kind of to the operational side during the crisis back in November, December. Felt like you were going back into your comfort zone. You explained that you've got a team of scientists and technologists that were there to carry out the role. Do you feel that you're now embedding a culture with those kind of frontline staff where they don't feel undermined, and they can then escalate their concerns to you without you feeling as though you've got to head into that space? Because it felt like you would kind of had dropped the reins on some of the more kind of wider strategic elements that was required in your role as the chief executive at that time.
I think the Pembury event was different. So on the Pembury event, it was clearly, as we were experiencing it in the business, it was a water quality driven event. And I have over 15, 20 years experience in water quality. We're not a massive company. I was contributing to that debate on that particular one. On every other debate, I operate the Gold Command. So I oversee the overall approach to the incident management. It was that one particular example where I felt I had, and this is what the culture. I mean, we've talked a lot about the culture of South East Water, and Caroline's absolutely right. The risk of groupthink is one thing, but it's a strong, unified culture that is effectively operating under a period of stress, but nevertheless working for each other. And that was, so I wanted to lend support to the team I knew was under stress in that particular example, for the same reason I visit bottled water stations, the same reason I visit other areas where we're looking at vulnerable customer support. That is the good part of the culture of South East Water. But on all other events and incidents, I'm very much running, as you'd expect a CEO to run, the Gold Command with the rest of my executive and key members of the management team to oversee the overall. And I did that for the January event, and I've done that for many other events. It was that particular example of the Pembury event, because of the area that it was affecting, that I felt I could add, if you like, a non-CEO piece of expertise, and that's what I did.
What do you think you would do differently in future?
Very much what we've done at Pembury. So put in early warnings, better monitoring, improved escalation processes, problem solving earlier in the process. We put on extra filters at Pembury as an extra stop. But we very much, we are going obviously across the business to make sure this is not replicated anywhere else, and that exercise is already started. We believe that Pembury is a complicated works that has run very stably for a very long time, and that meant we weren't monitoring what we should have done. It didn't give us any alarm bells as we went through, but we should have, using the risk approach we've all spoken about, spotted those issues earlier. The transformation programme and the change programme we put in place very much adds the resource for us to be able to do this and the impetus of the business to be able to do this.
What lessons have you taken from other utility companies to prepare for a stronger incident response performance? And how have other chief executives guided you in terms of your role in an emergency?
So on the first point, we were well aware that one of the companies that have done a very good job on recovery of interruptions is Severn Trent. And we are, as an industry, we do compare best practice. Although we went to compete as in a regulatory framework, we always share best practice and we always share water quality. So we went to see Severn Trent and how they managed it. That was very much how we organised our tanker stock and how we ran it, and was based on the model that we saw working elsewhere. In terms of chief exec support, in terms of my role, we discussed last time about whether I communicated early enough in the event, and I obviously canvassed their opinion on that, and they agreed with me. I got it wrong, and that's very much a lesson that we've learned into the playbook of how we handle future events. And the industry is very good at supporting each other and trying to understand these difficult, because we're all trying to do the public health service for our customers. That's what fundamentally runs through the DNA of anyone who works for a water company, and that's why that sharing goes on.
And how would you implement that change going forward?
In terms of
your response as a chief executive, you've admitted you've got that wrong.
I did get that wrong. We have very much gotten it was something that I hadn't experienced at that level before. We're using consultants to really help us work out what our effectively emergency playbook is, our crisis comms playbook is, what everyone's role in that playbook is. So that is a learning that we went through the pain of getting it wrong, and we're very much, as part of the transformation process is to learn from that, and that is well embedded already into the organisation. We've made a lot of progress in that area in the last 3 months.
How do you think you're empowering your scientists and technical staff and some of your new senior team members?
I'm not a command and control sort of leader, and that is not the style of South East Water. So they are heavily empowered. Bringing in the two external executive is adding a real different dimension, both in terms of allowing the existing executive to have more resource. We're a five-person executive for a number of years. We are a bigger business now. That's one of the big drivers for the change. Just in terms of the effect of the TOTEX that we need to spend, it's gone from 1 billion to 2 billion over a 5-year period. So there's a lot for us to do. So the focus is very much on new ideas, new impetus, and new experience against a lot more to do for our customers, which we're really excited to do. We think we've got a real opportunity to make a difference, and these two new roles are doing that. We very much empower them to do what they need to do in their area, very much empower them to deliver the assets that we need to deliver. We've got a new technical information directorate that's going to be looking at insight we're getting from smart meters. It's a new world when the investment's going to allow us to get customers' resilience back on track where we want it to be, get us ahead of climate change, so that we can get back to a new place where we're really delivering for our customers. That is the North Star of our business.
Thank you, Chair.
You're bringing in consultants now, you said there.
On the communications and the internal expertise on crisis communications as a water company wasn't there.
Right, just on the communications side of things.
We use consultants for various roles, as most businesses do, but the one I was referring to there.
Is that going to cost you then?
Sorry?
How much are these consultants going to cost you?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's a real. I mean, this is one of our biggest issue, apart from the lack of the fundamental water supply our customers told us, was the communications were poor. So
yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued just to explore your role though in Pembury. You lost days because you had the bad batch theory. Did you author that bad batch theory? Who was responsible for that?
It wasn't I did not.
Did you challenge it?
Yes, I looked to see well, by the time I arrived on site and had the site level detail, they'd already swapped the batch to try a different batch. They went back to, as Chris said, then it's pretty, a scientific principle with something, if something starts behaving differently, what's the changing input? And, what we should have done is explore more than one potential cause. So,
any reason why you didn't?
It was, again, I'll go back to the problem solving. If we'd have...
Exactly, that's what I'd hoped we'd get to this morning. Why didn't you?
So, if we'd... The thing is, sometimes issues on treatment works take a number of days to resolve. That is just a fact. That happens all over the industry. Now, we didn't help ourselves because we didn't spot it early enough. That lost days. And as we've said in other things, the system in South East Waters area means you don't have days because there isn't a lot of storage in the system. So those two things combine. But fundamentally, I'm not blaming the storage in the system on this one. It's a factor, but it's nothing to do with this, is that we didn't spot it early enough. That's, if we'd spot it earlier, we would have resolved it. We could have made it less likely to happen as well with some impacts on site, but for me, is we could have worked our way through that issue and solved it if we'd have spotted it earlier and responded to it earlier.
Tim, oh sorry, Henry,
just quickly,
Tim needs to get away, so can I? Yeah.
How long have you been working with Severn Trent on best practice? How long have you been learning from them for?
We've probably been talking to Severn Trent since we ordered the tankers, which was about 3 or 4 years ago.
You've been taking best practice from Severn Trent for 3 or 4 years?
On the tanker design, yeah.
So why haven't you been doing best practice internally within your company? Because that was something your report identified.
In which particular area?
Well, it says that this observed on-site visits and interviews where best practice was not implemented. So why are you doing that with Severn Trent, learning from best practice, but you're not doing that internally?
Well, we do always try and seek best practice.
Okay,
on this particular example, we weren't following it.
Your own report says that you don't.
It says we didn't follow best practice.
Okay. Thank you.
You're going to lead us in some questions around long-term infrastructure concerns, and then I'll come back to Josh.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Trade, lack of interconnectivity, historically low levels of mains replacements and other issues have been flagged as affecting resilience at South East Water. In your view, why was greater resilience not a priority in earlier price reviews?
So, it is, from South East Water's perspective, very conscious of the challenges of the evolution of the network and the fact that there are no resilience standards, and therefore the regulatory framework did not account, and it makes an assumption that the water balance is the prime driver, whereas you will always end up with challenges, particularly towards the end customer point of the infrastructure. And again, this is, if you do a comparison with the energy sector has capacity and capability standards that are in statute, and therefore you can make that judgment around whether the investments were adding to the resilience. Putting forward resilience plans is very challenging in the current regulatory framework, and we can see that through our rationale for going to the Competition and Markets Authority on Ofwat's final determination. And thankfully, we had a recognition from the Competition and Markets Authority, and particularly where Tunbridge Wells customers are concerned, the investments sanctioned through the CMA for Buell improves that level of connectivity and therefore alternatives in terms of the system. Other networks, other water companies have more interconnectivity, particularly those that have had historically large industrial activity going on, where that activity has now gone as the world has changed, but the capacity and the infrastructure has allowed a greater level of flexibility. And one of the challenges of the framework is by doing the comparisons, you don't always take into account the actual infrastructure in the ground. And again, that is illustrated through 88 treatment works for 2.3 million customers is very unusual as an organisation. And that drives, the history of that comes from local communities developing their own resources, and then a framework that has not recognised, modern requirements, modern interconnectivity. As the population has grown within the southeast, that then exacerbates the situation.
I think the committee recognised the points you make about regulation, and Mr Hinton made those points in January as well, and welcomed the IWC's recommendations. I don't think we can completely hide behind the regulatory framework, though. It should be a core part of your business and understanding that resilience is important in terms of your infrastructure. And Ofwat found that between 2009 and 2024, the price reviews, many of the service reservoirs had deteriorated from grade 3 to grade 4 or grade 5 conditions. So there was a resilience issue. But can I ask you, Mr Hinton in particular, you told us that Ofwat failed to give you sufficient funding to invest in the resilience of the infrastructure. But Ofwat has told us that the company often failed to make a robust case for funding. Can you respond to that?
I think it's Chris's point, really, is resilience as in terms of a line of funding is relatively new in the water industry. It's been handled in the past under the guise of water resource plans or quality issues. And so resilience in itself, in my mind, can be, it's an outcome, but it's also can be an input. So Chris has mentioned resilience standards. So for me, just so that everyone's clear what
Can I just say, Mr. Hinton, so because I'm short of time, I've got to go bother a minister about something else in my constituency. My question was, Ofwat says you failed to make a robust case for funding or had already received funding in previous price reviews to invest in resilience. So how do you respond to the suggestion that you're not providing robust business cases?
The business case is difficult to make in the absence of standards. The business case is effectively on a case-by-case basis, on a community-by-community basis, the most recent example of which is the expansion of Buell Water that Chris mentioned, which we needed to effectively take in front of the CMA as an assessment. So this isn't, I'm not criticising Ofwat here, it's the framework by which the assessment can be made and therefore judged is not there yet. The white paper is proposing it should be there, and once it's there, it'd be easy for both sides, both for the regulator to judge and the company to make the case.
I take that point. I do think it's an important point. But two of you today have talked about the extra £100 million from the CMA's redeterminations. Am I right in remembering that when you asked about this in January, you felt you needed £300 million of investment? So are you satisfied with £100 million, or do you still feel it was the £300 million figure that was needed?
Well, we have actually got over £300 million for resilience in total. So that's an extra £100 million. And we haven't got everything, but we have got a lion's share of the resilience money that we need. And we very much can progress and make the resilience of the South East markedly improve with that level of investment. So we didn't get everything, no, but we have got well over 300 million, which is fantastic. At the previous price review, we had around 70-80 million. So there's a huge step up in the amount of resilience funding that we've now procured for the customers of South East.
And in fact, in the region, you received one of the largest increases in revenue overall, didn't you? So hopefully customers in the region should be seeing improvements in the future. Can I ask about those issues I mentioned at the beginning? Ofwat found problems with the upkeep of treatment works, trunk mains, boreholes and reservoirs, and that maintenance funding should have been applied for over 10 years ago. How can you turn it around as quickly as possible?
I mean, Ofwat makes some points in the investigation there, which that we recognise, and we were always within the regulatory framework balancing the risk of different maintenance choices. We have thousands of maintenance choices every year. We got 88 treatment works, all of which have got thousands of assets on them in total, and so we're constantly trading that off. Boreholes is one we are very acutely aware of. And that's very much in the transformation programme. The overall yield on those is very much in the transformation programme. We would have made a choice about intervening on another asset when we chose to reduce the maintenance on boreholes. We're constantly making that trade-off choice. We overspent our TOTEX by 100 million. So it wasn't as if we weren't spending the money. We were trying to trade off across different assets. And sometimes those trade-off choices can be challenged and can be wrong because they are very much trade-off choices made at a point in time.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, Ofwat said that you failed to ensure service reservoirs were adequately and regularly inspected for at least 10 years and failed to maintain trunk mains by undertaking sufficient preventative maintenance. But it's interesting, by your own papers, since 2017, you've rated the risks of trunk main failure as high or as extreme. I appreciate you've got to trade off different choices around maintenance, but this has been a major issue on your radar for a long time as a business.
I mean, the reason we have trunk mains as a high risk, even if they were brand new, the trunk mains would be high risk for South East Water because we have a linear system. So if a trunk main fails, every customer downstream of that trunk main will fail. So the risk register recognises the importance of those trunk main assets in delivering water to customers, irrespective of the maintenance on it. We do monitor really closely our trunk mains, and our record of repairing trunk mains is very good when they go. Trunk mains are highly expensive, and again, you have to balance replacing the trunk main at the right point in that asset life against boreholes, reservoir. And so that's the constant asset management
yes, but even after work, something would remain high risk. Even after mitigation, it would remain high risk.
It would, because it's a single asset failure point.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Just on the Ofwat report, they say that in some cases you're already funded to deliver resilience projects, but you didn't. Why was that?
Last price review, particularly different to this one, we were funded a TOTEX number. So the risk decision was effectively ours to make. And we traded off different projects. I'll give you an example of one we weren't going to do but did. So Barkham is our key works on the south coast of, it supplies 50 to 60,000 customers. And as we went into the period, we started to see more climate change. We had a set of work planned to do at Barkham, but recognising Barkham was a key risk, we completely accelerated that and added much more to the scope of Barkham because we saw that as a new risk. That would have meant we moved money from another allocated area. We weren't funded any schemes against resilience by Ofwat because it was a TOTEX envelope. So the risk choice was ours. So I can't point to any schemes that we weren't done, but we were constantly trading risk. That's what one of our main roles as an executive team and a water company is to try and make those decisions because we're trying to balance affordability with water supply risk. That is the constant challenge that we have.
These were your choices.
Yeah.
Josh, you're going to do some questioning around communications and vulnerable customers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll start with quite a straightforward question, if I may. Mr. Hinton, how many people work on communications at South East Water?
I think the team's around 20.
Okay, so that's quite a substantial number then. Do you think that's sufficient in light of the clear shortcomings in your crisis communications over these outages?
Look, I've mentioned already that we've effectively bolstered that resource with third-party expertise and crisis comms. My team are excellent at doing the comms that we need as a water company in what you call peacetime. And we were all challenged, not just the communication team, on what happened in the last few months. So they are very adept at providing information to customers on events, on water efficiency, and all the key bits that a water company needs on its BAU, if you like. But we have bolstered that team in terms of expertise since for crisis communications.
You've brought consultants in, but what happens when they leave? Has the number of people working on comms increased? Have you spoken directly with that team about these failings? Are you addressing the apparent breakdown between the operational and communications teams? Has any crisis comms training occurred? I'm trying to get to the bottom of how you are addressing these clear shortcomings.
I mean, we are developing joint playbooks is the fundamental handover point. So between us and the consultants, we are developing playbooks that would mean that effectively the home team can adopt if the consultants are not there. And we're not a huge company. Of course, I speak to the comms team all the time. They're literally around the corner from me. And so we have conversations about what we could do differently. We had some significant learnings out of this, there's no question. It's not something we were used to dealing with. But we've now developed that skill set. The team size is almost certainly going to increase. I can't tell you to what number, but the team size is going to increase when we get into the position of, if you like, BAU back again, because BAU is very different to what it used to be.
But having worked in communications myself in the NHS, for example, the last team I was in, I think there were 6 of us, and we worked in a big organisation, and we made sure that we had crisis comms plans, not just playbooks, but proper plans and strategies in place for health emergencies across a whole city. And we did that with 6 members of staff. So why do you think with more than triple that you failed so comprehensively to communicate properly with your customers?
I'll have to expand on what the comms team do. Actually, I was significant part of our role is we put infrastructure in the ground, and when we put infrastructure in the ground, we like to make sure we engage fully with stakeholders, local authorities, planning authorities, hold open days, and those kind of activities. The comms team are very much involved in that activity. It's very much part of delivery of a capital scheme. So that's one of the big elements the comms team do. When I say playbook, what I mean is this is a process. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle it in the future. We can always call on the external resource to do that. We're very much looking, this is a key stream of how we want to improve going forward about the transformation programme we've got in place, is how we effectively communicate externally to stakeholders.
Up and running to serve new developments right from the moment the first homes are sold. A new guarantee for our communities that can be summed up in 4 simple words. No doctors, no development. What does that mean in practice? It means that the local authority and the NHS would work together to identify how much extra GP capacity is needed to serve new developments, and then require developers to pay for it through their levies. Crucially, that means funding not just the bricks and mortar of GP surgeries, but also the contracts, so there are actually doctors to staff them while patients are first moving in. Because what happens right now, as we all know too well, is that GP surgeries for new developments are often promised but never delivered. That's because building the surgeries often takes too long, and there's no new money to fund the GP contracts until patients have moved into an area, meaning they just can't hire the staff when the first homes are sold. So the first new residents go to oversubscribed GP practices elsewhere, meaning there's still no new money for the new surgery, meaning it simply never materialises. This is all because the government just doesn't understand how important this is, because it doesn't understand what communities really need. Our plan would end that vicious cycle by guaranteeing the funding is in place to hire GPs as soon as the first new homes are sold. It would give a better deal to existing communities and to new residents moving in. It would help to rebuild trust and get the community buy-in we need for new homes. It would help to tackle the GP crisis that fuels so much of the crisis across our NHS. No doctors, no development. It's a simple guarantee, but one that can change lives. For the family that can finally see a GP when they need one, and for the community that finally gets the homes it needs. That's what we're fighting for. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to your questions. So, I think I have a list somewhere. Yeah. Can I go to Katie first?
Just a question on a big story today, if that's all right. Health is obviously one of many competing priorities for spending. How high up on the list of priorities for spending would you put defence right now? And secondly on that, you of course know that George Robertson, the author of the Strategic Defence Review, is coming out with some big criticisms today of the government's approach to defence. He's expected reportedly to say that Liberal Democrats have turned down or not taken up his offer of a briefing about the Strategic Defence Review. Is that correct? And what does it say about your attitude to defence?
Well, first of all, defence is very high in our spending priorities. It's one of the reasons why I've asked the Prime Minister so much about it. We put forward lots of ideas. For example, a European rearmament bank. For example, our defence bonds, so we can get that investment really early on. We've been pushing the government to go far faster to the 3% GDP by the end of the decade. We really need to put forward proposals. We're the only party that's actually put forward proposals about how that could be reached. I read the comments of Lord Robertson. We've searched the inbox. We can't find the invite, but we've now emailed him because we're really happy to talk to him. We often go to defence briefings at the Ministry of Defence. It's always a priority for my office, so it is a priority for us. And the reason we've been majoring on defence is because it is a party priority. Next to Shihab.
Shihab Khan from ITV News. I'm going to also ask you a couple of questions. The first one about your plans for no doctors, no development, no doctors, as you've got on the podium there. There's hundreds, maybe even thousands of resident doctors who are striking at the moment, some of whom are training to be GPs because they are unhappy with their pay and overall package. What would be your message to them and to the government when it comes to the negotiations with those resident doctors? On defence, just following up on the question you just answered, we are expecting Lord Robertson tonight to be very critical of the investment, not just of this government, but of previous governments as well, into the armed forces. Under the coalition government that you served in, defence spending was cut by 7.7% in real terms. Do you believe that was a mistake? And do you believe that the decisions made by the coalition government have contributed to the position we are in now?
Well, on the resident doctors, we've said very clearly that they shouldn't be on strike and they should go back to serve patients. But we've also said the government needs to sort out the crisis in the NHS. And if it did, I think many patients would benefit, of course, but also I think doctors will feel a lot happier. The doctors that we often meet are saying they can't get jobs. They've done all this training and they can't get a job as a GP, for example. If you look at the number of vacancies that there are and the number of people who want to be GPs, it's quite a scandal. And our policy today is about breaking that vicious cycle. The system isn't working. And as we show, the money is actually there. There's something called Community Infrastructure Levies, CIL, and there's 9 billion unspent. So we could be putting that to make sure that this vicious cycle that doesn't see the doctors who trained helping out the GP crisis, that ends. So that's why this proposals day is so important. It could, I think, make a big contribution to ending the GP crisis, and I think that would help the whole debate on the NHS with those resident doctors. In terms of defence spending, I think that's been a failure of all governments for a long time. I think we all political parties need to face up to that. The question is, are you doing that quickly and properly? I believe we've been leading that argument. We're the only ones who argue for a European rearmament bank, for example. We're the only ones arguing for defence bonds. You know, I don't see the Conservative reform putting any serious proposals about how you would meet the increase in defence spending. And I look forward to what Lord Robertson says if he's got some proposals, and we'll listen very carefully to him and others. We need to get together as a country. The defence challenges for our country are so serious. With war on our continent for the first time for a long time, with Russia invading Ukraine, surely that's been the wake-up call that we needed. The government hasn't gone as fast as it should have, given those circumstances. Faye.
Hi, this is Faye Brown from Sky News. You've called for an inquiry into Nigel Farage's Bitcoin deal. Could you just explain to people who might not understand what exactly is your concern about this? And if I could just ask a broad question as well. The Liberal Democrats obviously won record amounts of seats at the general election, but since then we've seen Reform UK and the Greens surge in popularity. Are you frustrated, and is there anything you wish you'd have done differently?
Well, on Nigel Farage, as people will know from the media reports, he's invested in a sort of cryptocurrency business, but he's done more than that. He's now promoting this business. And not only is there a vested interest, but the question is, is he persuading people to put money into a risky business? And the conclusion I draw from this example is that we need to change the rules for MPs. MPs should not be allowed to promote specific financial services or products in the way we're seeing Nigel Farage doing. Let's remember we saw in America Donald Trump doing exactly the same thing, and far, far worse. The way Donald Trump has gone about his cryptocurrency businesses is he is enriching himself, enriching his friends, and frankly, making other people poor. And I don't think we want that type of leadership here. Nigel Farage seems to want to copy Donald Trump, and I think we should move as a parliament to outlaw that type of behaviour that Nigel Farage seems happy to copy. Sorry, you're saying, oh yes, of course, yeah. Listen, you're right, we got the best result for over 100 years at the general election, but we kept on winning since. At the last May elections a year ago, we beat the Conservatives and Labour for the first time ever. And it was our 7th year in a row of wins. If you look at council by-elections across the country, which party won the most in 2025? It was the Liberal Democrats. And I make this prediction as we look at the council elections between now and the next election. The last election became the biggest third party for over 100 years. By the time of the next election, we'll be one of the 2 biggest parties in local government, one of the 2 biggest parties in local government. And with politics changing, that will be a massive change across our country, and the Liberal Democrats will be absolutely central to that. So I think our strategy is about winning, and we keep winning. Is Catherine here? No. Can I go to Natasha?
Hi, Natasha Clark from LBC. Just on defence again, Lord George Robinson has said the UK security is in peril. He's accused the government of corrosive complacency. Your war bonds plan would raise around £20 billion, you said earlier this year. Some experts have put the black hole in the defence investment plan as around £28 billion. Is there any other government departments you think the Treasury should be looking at to see whether they can make any savings? Do you think it's now time for a defence tax to properly fund the extra billions of pounds that we need? And if I may, on South East Water, the bosses of that are appearing before MPs today. They've conceded some of the problems were foreseeable. Do you think that he should remain in post in that job?
He being the Chief Executive?
The Chief Executive of South East Water. I think he's the one that rated as an 8 out of 10 is handling the crisis.
Can you give me his name so I'm really clear?
I don't have his name to hand, sorry.
Okay, not to worry. On defence spending, you're right to say that we're the only party that's put forward a serious proposal with our defence bonds, raising 20 billion. I'm really proud that we've led that debate. I'm proud we've led the debate with the European Rearmament Bank. We put that proposal forward, having worked with a former chief of staff and defence experts and people who founded the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development after the wall came down. So it's a serious proposal, and I'm really disappointed that the government hasn't looked at either our bank proposal or our defence bonds proposal. The Treasury, of course, should be looking across government to find other ways to fund the additional money, but we have made the biggest set of proposals of any political party. We've been leading this debate. I want other parties to put forward their ideas and let's have a discussion. This is so important to our country. I've never known a time when we have been so ill prepared for the threats that face us. And in the context of Donald Trump undermining NATO, potentially still pulling out of NATO, we have to be far more serious about defence. We need to have that debate that I think Lord Robinson has called for to make sure people really understand the scale of the threat. And we know we've got to invest in new technologies, whether it's drone technology, learning from our Ukrainian allies or missile defence regimes. So we've really got to step that up. As regards the CEO of South East Water, if it's the person I think it is, I've already called for his resignation when he failed so disastrously.
David Hinton.
Yes, so that's the gentleman concerned. So I'm happy to repeat my call that he should resign. I went to Tunbridge Wells when South East Water failed the people of Tunbridge Wells several times over a period of years. And if he's now admitting it was foreseeable and predictable, I'm surprised he's not offering his resignation already. Right, can I go to Peter?
Hi. In terms of the announcement, some Liberal Democrats have got a name that might be deserved or not, for coming up with creative reasons to oppose local housing development. And often it's in the perfectly good justification that the infrastructure isn't there. if this doctor's guarantee was in place, would you be willing to say to Liberal Democrats across the country, look, if the infrastructure is there, then please don't try these slightly NIMBY-ish tactics, because we do need to build as quickly as we can. And on the second point, I don't think you actually answered the ITV question about whether you think it was in retrospect a good or bad idea for the coalition government which you served with that defence and on
Well, first of all, on your first question on NIMBYism, I'm afraid Liberal Democrat councils are the reverse. If you look at our record in a whole range of councils, I'm happy to give you all the figures, we're ones who actually build homes. I could take you to Eastleigh, who've been building homes over a number of years, got a very good record. I could take you to Cambridgeshire. I could take you to my own area, Kingston, where I have to declare a vested interest. My wife is the housing portfolio holder. She's overseeing the largest council house building programme for 40 years. I could take you to the Vale of White Horse in Oxfordshire. I could take you to South Lakeland. Across the country, actually, Liberal Democrats have a very, very proud record of building homes. But there is a problem with infrastructure. And you talk to local authorities, you talk to local communities, actually you even talk to developers. For so long, governments have failed to work with local authorities and groups like the NHS to make sure that that social infrastructure is there. And really what we're about today is to say, look, NIMBYism arises when people say, look, I can't get a GP appointment at the moment, I can't get my kids into local school, the roads are congested already, and you want to make that even worse. That causes NIMBYism and the distrust. So if you're going to deal with that, you have to have a plan. And we've long argued for community-led development, where the community is put in place, not just with their homes, but with the infrastructure, and particularly the social infrastructure. And if you look around the country, there are so many examples where this is getting in the way. I think this would be welcomed by not just Liberal Democrat authorities, but many others. I've talked to Liberal Democrat MPs who are battling in their own constituencies, frustrated that GP surgeries that were promised have not been built. So you go to Oxfordshire again, Ollie Glover is battling to get a new GP surgery on a home development with 3,300 new homes. That surgery was promised, has been striking, both about the last Conservative government from 2019 to 2024 and this Labour government, it's obvious that things have changed. And because things have changed, they should have changed their policy far quickly. The Conservatives haven't got a leg to stand on. They undermined the British Army and took it to its smallest level since before the Napoleonic Wars. And this government inherited from the Conservatives a Royal Navy that's smaller than at any time over the last 400 years. So let's put this in some context. And therefore, both the last Conservative government and now this Labour government needs to step on the pedal very, very fast. We're saying they'd have cross-party support for that. We're saying we're putting forward ideas. And I think that's the right thing to do, given the circumstances we see now. Can I go to Noah?
Thank you. And could you clarify, with local elections coming up, Lib Dems oppose and correct me if I'm wrong, cuts to benefits, you're against reforms to immigration, you're effectively more left-wing than the Labour Party. Are you happy to declare that to the public, that you are actually more left-wing than Labour? And also, I think today a lot of people will be refreshed to see you making a serious policy proposal rather than flinging yourself across a water slide or any other such activity. Is this the beginning of serious Ed Davey rather than Ed Benumpty?
Well, first of all, I suggest people look at our actual policies. So you talked about welfare. I had argued that what the Conservatives did on PIP saw the welfare bill increase dramatically. What did they do? During COVID, they ended face-to-face assessments. And then after COVID, they kept the end of face-to-face assessments. And what happened was the PIP claims went massively up. You can see it in the charts. So the Conservatives' failure on a basic thing like preventing fraud, because they changed the assessment process, led to a lot of the extra welfare spending, and they should apologise for that. So I argued, along with others, that should change. The government's now doing it. So I'm afraid we have a much better record than you were proposing, suggesting. And on immigration, I mean, we were the ones arguing that two things. First of all, that we should have Nightingale centres to process asylum applications, and particularly those Nightingale centres we saw in COVID, to do it really, really rapidly. The Conservatives allowed that backlog and that created all that tension and problems for everybody. And we've said, and we were the hotels, people who have got a right to be here can get on with working, and people who can't will be sent home. And then that saves huge amounts of money to the taxpayer, gets rid of those asylum application backlogs. So that is a very concrete policy, putting right the failures of the Conservatives. We've also said that we need return agreements with our European colleagues. We used to have them, called the Dublin Convention. And thanks to the Conservatives and to Nigel Farage, when we left Europe, that Dublin Convention was torn up and we're not part of it. And that's when the small boats problem arises. So I would say on immigration, because we think that there's a way that works, the way we used to have it, and we're proposing that, that we have the best position on dealing with the small boat crisis, and I think Conservatives and Reform should hang their heads in shame. Now, in terms of the visuals, this is what I call them. I'm doing loads of visuals. You should have seen the launch of our local government elections when I baked cakes and I decorated cakes and I gave them to lots of our volunteers who've been working so hard as a big thank you. One of my favourites on the campaign trail, I did a tour last week at Newcastle and Hull and Sheffield and Manchester and Stockport and Birmingham, and I did a number of visuals. And I played chess in the garden. I won the match, so I was really quite pleased by that particular visual. So you're seeing me still do them. Right now, George.
Thank you. Yeah, George Parker from the FT. I think back to defence. As you know, there's a summit in Prime Minister on Friday to discuss the state's of news. Would you be prepared, you leading the country, to commit British military assets to securing safe passage in the Strait of Hormuz after the fighting stops? And just going back to questions about how well the party is doing, I've heard your long list of statistics about how well you're doing, but you speak to quite a few members of your party, MPs as well, who think you should be doing a lot better. Do you share some of their frustration, and why do you think they are frustrated?
Let's deal with that first. I think opposition is difficult. And you get into government, you work really, really hard, you're ambitious, and you want to change the world, and you find the system doesn't allow you, and it's frustrating. I absolutely get that. But I actually think the fact that we keep winning is something that should reassure people. We have a fantastic team of MPs, they're absolutely brilliant, and I am absolutely confident that together we will win many more seats at the next general election. And as I said to an earlier question, I think by the end of this Parliament, we'll be one of the two biggest parties in local government. We're on track to do that because we keep winning in these council elections. In May, we're going to win even more councillors. We're going to win in Surrey, in Sussex, in Hampshire, in Hertfordshire, in Huntingdonshire against the Tories. We're going to win against Labour across London in places like Merton and Southwark and Lambeth and Brent and Ealing and Camden and Haringey and elsewhere. We're going to win in Birmingham, in Newcastle and Stockport. I could mention many other places where we will be winning. And I think that is what a good leader does. He leads his party into winning elections. So, remind me your first question. Yeah. Well, first of all, I've welcomed this conference. It's really, really important that the UK is getting around the table with our allies, be they in Europe, be they in the Commonwealth, be they in the Gulf and elsewhere, to have what I would call a sensible grown-up approach compared to what we're seeing from the White House. So I commend the Prime Minister for doing that. He has also spoken that he would be willing to see military assets once the fighting has stopped. And I think that's absolutely right to look at that with our allies. I do think, though, he would say, and I think he'd be right to say, diplomacy is the best way of doing this. And the problem we've seen with American diplomacy is it's failed miserably. And I don't think anyone's that surprised at the failure of the Americans to negotiate in good faith. However, so the Iranians are themselves to blame as well. They should not be closing the Strait of Hormuz. They should open it. They shouldn't be damaging their neighbours in the region or the rest of the world. And I hope that what comes out of the summit next week with the Prime Minister and other our allies coming together is that we can give that message to the Gulf states, to Iran, that the Straits of Hormuz should be opened in a peaceful way. The rights of navigation ought to be ones that we all share. Nina. Well, on this proposal, I think it would really help house building, because I think one of the barriers to building homes is people feel that they don't have the GPs and the infrastructure. And our whole argument today is this will help house building, because it will take local communities with them. It will deal with both the housing crisis and the GP crisis. Difficult to put a number on it, of course, but I think it would be absolutely a very significant boost. It has, by the way, the Royal College of GPs has commented on this proposal, and they say it makes sense, and indeed they support this approach, because they've seen how the current system fails. People don't get the GP practices that they were promised. The money is there, to your point about whether it would go up the system. Money is actually there. 9 billion of community infrastructure levy not spent. 3 billion lying in local authority coffers for over 5 years, unspent. And what we're saying is let's use the money that's there, and let's get the dynamic so we can get the GPs and get the homes built. We think it makes sense. Obviously, the Royal College of GPs feel it makes sense. I think a lot of developers will actually see that it makes sense and would ensure that more homes get built. In terms of the local elections, well, I hear lots of different commentary, most of which I don't agree with. But let me give you one example. There was an MRP poll out the other day, and everyone said, oh, look, the Greens are going to get 20 or so MPs in this MRP poll. They forgot to mention that we would get 3 or 4 times more than them in that MRP poll. So it depends how you report the poll, right? I actually think the next general election will get 7, 8, 9 times more MPs than the Greens, not least because they've forgotten about the environment. And if you look at the Greens' record in local government, given we're talking about local elections, which party has 14 of the top 20 local authorities for recycling? The Liberal Democrats. 14 of the top 20 councils in the country are Lib Dem led. Where are the Greens? Well, they are all under 100, and I think Mid-Suffolk, for example, is 162nd. There are reform councils led councils doing better than the Greens on recycling. So many people think the Greens have lost their way, and the more people realise that, they'll be voting Liberal Democrat if they care about the environment, if they care about nature. And on Wales, I'm going to Cardiff on Friday, so do come and join me. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes the conference. Thank you very much for coming. If you want a bit more detail about the policy, I'm sure my colleagues can help you. We're very excited about it. Coming on the back of what we said for cutting fuel duty, petrol prices and diesel prices and bus fares and rail fares just 2 weeks ago, I think it shows that we are the party coming with ideas to deal with the cost of living crisis, to deal with the NHS crisis. Thank you very much.
Have to squeeze out every last song. Question.
Yeah, that's true. Which bit? The bit about second highest number of seats by the...
Sorry?
Yeah. We keep winning. I think this will be the 8th set of local elections.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.